All right, so I'm here with our bass guitar instructor. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
All right, my name's Tim Carey. I am a bass player. However, I do also play a number of other instruments. I play piano and guitar pretty frequently, but I have to say bass is definitely my favorite instrument to play. In addition to electric bass, I like to play upright bass as well, ukulele bass, and in my spare time, I actually like to play a lot of banjo. It's kind of a secret of mine. I think it's an extremely fun instrument to play.
So what, when you were growing up, led you to music?
It's a good question. So my mother is a piano teacher and has been since before I was born. So music always seemed a pretty natural thing for me, just because it was always in my house. My mom would have students come over, so I'd hear people play piano all the time. She was also a performer. So around the age, I want to say like fourth grade, I think it was fourth grade, my mom decided that she wanted to give me the option to take saxophone lessons from a local musician. He was also a bass player. And one day, a little bit before Christmas, he said, you know, I can tell you've been staring at my bass every time you come over here. Do you want to just do a bass lesson instead of a saxophone lesson? And I was like, sure. So he taught me how to play this Metallica song called Master of Puppets. Famous song. Yeah. Nice. I had an acoustic guitar at home, so I learned it kind of in secret and would practice it in my room on the guitar. And then one day, I want to say like a month or two later, my mom comes to pick me up, and she walks in to the lesson studio, and I'm sitting there playing Master of Puppets on my teacher's bass, not playing saxophone, mind you. I ended up getting a bass for Christmas. That was fifth grade, I think, and so I would have been about 12 years old.
Okay.
And the rest is history. After that, I just fell in love with the instrument, played it every single day.
Very nice. And so now primarily strings.
I always had a guitar, like a nylon string classical guitar, sitting by the couch growing up. It was just kind of the family guitar. So for a long time, I would just sit down and pluck on that thing. I learned to read tablature at a fairly young age before I started taking lessons in those things. You can just, back in those days, you know, the internet wasn't around. So what we used to do is get this magazine called Guitar World. I think it's still a magazine. We'd get Guitar World magazine, and in the back, it would have 5 songs a month, the most popular songs on the radio, and just with tablature and music notation. But at that age, you know, I'm like 11 years old. I didn't really know much about how to read music, particularly not at that level. So I would just listen to the songs and learn the tablature on this, you know, not very nice acoustic nylon string guitar. From there, all of the strings just kind of became available because on one level, they're all very similar. I mean, they're different instruments, but as you grow as a musician, you know, those fundamental skills you pick up in the beginning, those tend to transfer to other instruments as well.
And you went to college at Cornish, right?
Yeah, I went to Cornish College of the Arts, which is a great school, wonderful school. I had an excellent time there.
So what did you study?
Great question. So when I was there, I was primarily an acoustic, upright, double bass guy.
Okay.
So I played jazz, acoustic bass, and classical. I learned to use the bow. But I always maintained my electric bass stuff, not on the side, but more, I should say, in the clubs, more so than in the classroom. So I would play all my gigs on electric and play, you know, funk music and hip hop music and rock music and things like that when I was on the weekends. But in school, I was really studying reading music, analyzing music, music history, technique on various instruments. So I picked up a lot of my piano and guitar, my proper guitar skills, I like to say, when I was at Cornish, just from the course load that I had there. Which, to this day, I don't know where I'd be without that education. You know, it's one thing, I remember, like when I was in college, I could already go out and get a gig, for sure. You know, I could play the style, and I knew enough songs that somebody could call some brown-eyed girl or whatever, and yeah, I can play that. But it wasn't until I went to school and I really got an education in music that I kind of realized that with those fundamental skills, anything I want to do in the field of music is now not only available to me, but I kind of have an edge over other people with these fundamental skills of being able to read music, transcribe music, the ear training, and then the pedagogy, the instrumental pedagogy, you know. One of my jobs now is I direct a high school jazz band. And had I not spent that time at Cornish learning about those instruments and actually getting that orchestration ability through practice, there's no way I could do that today.
Yeah.
You know, that's something you don't learn on the bandstand, really. You kind of have to study it.
They're very different skill sets, reading music versus playing by ear. And a lot of the musicians that I have met along my path, especially when I was younger, had one or the other. And they didn't
Right.
really have a holistic kind of education. And so it was hard for them to learn about all the different styles of music and actually be able to immerse themselves in that.
That's very true. And it's one of those things, too, where it's like, you don't know what you don't know. Because I remember when I first started going to Cornish, it was weird. I kind of did it because I knew that I should go to college. And I knew that music was the clear thing that I should be going to college for, given my prior experience and my skill set. And I also had a lot of scholarships. So I was like, well, this is going to be financially the best option as well. So I decided to go to school for music, not knowing what I was going to get out of it and how essential that would be for the goals that I had set up for myself.
Yes.
So funny. It's like I had these goals, and thank you, Mom, basically, for sitting me down and saying, if this is what you want to do, you're going to need to get a degree in it. You're going to need a higher level of training than you're going to get just from the internet and from your friends,
Yes.
And that proved to be very true. And served me well to this day.
You are actually teaching at Cornish now, right?
I'm an adjunct professor, adjunct instructor.
Okay.
I've been there for 7 years, and when I first got the job there, I got it because I specialized basically in one topic,
Okay.
which was jazz theory and jazz arranging. Kind of a niche topic, but the person who started the program there was retiring, and he trusted me to take over his theory class, so I took over his theory class, and over the course of the last 7 years, I picked up a few other classes there, so I've taught ear training, and I've taught some ensembles and a bunch of private lessons through the school. And yeah, it's a wonderful place. I love that school.
Nice.
Very creative, very forward-thinking, progressive.
Okay, and so you also teach at Bellevue College.
I do. I teach there as well. There is a totally different thing. It's weird. At Cornish, I feel like when I'm at Cornish, it's very artistic, I'm free to just be inspired and let it go. Bellevue, I teach class guitar. I teach 2 or 3 sections depending on the quarter. And then I teach a class called Introduction to Music Technology, where I teach about MIDI sequencing, and I teach about synthesizers and how to, music technology. But it's an intro level class, so it's just a little bit of each thing. We talk about music notation software as well, and a little bit of mixing, a little bit of Pro Tools action, stuff like that. So that teaching environment is much more structured. It's much more, here's the syllabus, here's what's expected of you. You either did it or you didn't do it, which totally makes sense, because at a school like that, I have different students every quarter. So every 10 weeks, I get 90 new students, Whereas at Cornish, I'll have the same students for 4 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the same small group, too. It'll be like 6 students for 4 years.
So you get to really see them develop.
Oh, yeah. And you're really involved in their education, to the point where, it gets to be like a family sometimes.
Oh,
I have
nice.
students that graduated, and we're still really close friends years later, just because how often you see them, and, they're just seeing them come in as a beginner and leave as a near professional, you get really close with them. Whereas at Bellevue, it's just a little different. It's like, somebody for 10 weeks, and then you see them on campus. You never have a class with them again. It's interesting.
Huh. Yeah. Why did you decide to be a part of Practicing Musician?
I want music education to be as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. Now, granted, I could just teach free lessons all day long around Seattle. That wouldn't be the most efficient way to achieve that goal.
1-to-1, yeah.
Yeah. So when we met and you approached me with this opportunity, it just was right at my alley. It was, okay, if I can come in here and I can share some knowledge and then have a platform for that knowledge to then be shared with who knows how many other people at a low cost to them and with good intentions behind it, furthering music education in as many communities as possible, there's no downside here. So as soon as I heard about it, I wanted to be a part of it, basically.
Nice. And so you're a unique instructor for Practicing Musician because you have done video lessons before.
I have, yeah.
And so do you think Practicing Musician differs from those kinds of mediums for delivery?
So far, my experience has been that it's significantly more organized.
Okay.
And yeah, just in terms of the curriculum and the whole overarching plan. I also think that the amount of lessons you're doing and how quickly or how I don't want to say quickly, but how the progressions are small. So each lesson is just a little bit above the last one.
Mm-hmm.
I think is going to really have a nice impact on the student. It's almost like what it's like when you are practicing 8 hours a day. You don't even notice that you're getting better.
Yeah.
Because you're so focused on what you can't do that you're always working on something, and then one day you stop and you go, wait, I'm way better than I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
That's the psychology background coming out, is understanding that, first of all, that's the problem with our traditional education in general, is sometimes we blame the student for not learning, but sometimes it can be the teacher.
Mm.
And it might just be that the way that a teacher teaches doesn't land with the student. Doesn't mean that the teacher's bad, doesn't mean that the student can't learn. Just means that there's not the right materials, or there's not a bridge between what they need, what each other needs. Really what I've been trying to do with this is to provide the appropriate materials for everybody to learn, and essentially make it in digestible chunks, so that it's exactly like you're saying, as a musician would actually practice. You look at one thing, and then you practice it immediately afterwards. You're not looking at 5, 10, 20 different concepts and then being like, well, what do I do now?
Right.
You look at one thing and then you practice it.
Yeah.
And then you get it in your body, in your brain, and then you move on to the next.
Yeah, and progress little by little.